I'm going to go ahead and get started. Okay. Let me know if you have any problems seeing my screen. Of course, I've lost my Zoom. Okay. So, welcome to Building a Perfectly Imbalanced Life. I'm very excited you're here. You can have your camera on, you can have your camera off. I am going to be recording the webinar, and because we have quite a few people who weren't able to make it today, and they'll be watching the replay. At the end, I'm going to actually stop the recording so we have some time to have a conversation, and we can feel a little bit more comfortable sharing. If you have any questions, pop them into the chat, and I'm going to get started. You're welcome to stop and ask me any questions during the presentation, or you can save them to the end. Also, if you're watching this on replay, you actually don't have to watch it. I'm going to verbally give the cues so you can feel free if you're busy cooking dinner or doing something else. You can still get the information. I know sometimes it's hard to find the time to watch a replay. Okay, so a little bit about me. My name is Candy. I'm a life coach. I love to craft. You can actually see my sewing machine in the background. I love textiles. I am an empath. I read a lot of books. I'm pretty much an introvert, although I do enjoy spending time with people. And I live with a free roam bunny whose name is Sweetie. If you follow me on Instagram, you'll see her. I live in Chicago. It is 8 degrees here today, so it is a little chilly. What I want to start with is a little bit of self-care goes a long way. So even though, I'm talking about finding balance in life, one of the things we do need to keep in mind is taking care of ourselves. You may have come to this workshop because you are stressed or overwhelmed, or life just feels a little off. It is kind of a cliche, but it is so true. You need to put your oxygen mask on first. I often, and I'm laughing as I say this, I often treat myself like a 2-year-old. Have I had food? Have I had water? Have I had sleep? And if my emotional levels are out of whack, I check in with the basics first and make sure I'm taking care of those needs. And then I can move on to the emotional challenges, finding balance in my life, all of the other things. And I start here because being overwhelmed and stressed is actually really hard on our bodies. It actually has a physical chemical reaction going on. And if you want your body and your brain to carry you through this life, then you need to take care of it. Which leads me to how to live a good life. There's an amazing gentleman named Jonathan Fields, and he started a podcast called The Good Life Project. And he has interviewed so many people, scientists, wellness coaches, sport coaches, brain surgeons. I mean, just so many different types of people trying to find how to live a good life. And through the course of all of those interviews, what he found was you need to fill these 3 buckets, as he calls them. The first one is your vitality bucket. And that's kind of what we touched on with self-care. It's about optimizing your state of your mind and your body, taking care of yourself. The next bucket is called your connection bucket. And that's about cultivating deep and meaningful relationships. And then finally, your contribution bucket. And this can be the work that you do for your day job, but it doesn't necessarily have to. And I think that's sometimes what we find challenging if we're stuck in a job that doesn't fulfill that need, is we can find other ways to have that contribution and to make that sort of impact on the world that sometimes I think we feel driven to do. At least I do. At my core, I really like to help people, which is partly why I became a life coach. It's very important to me. So these three buckets, it's good to know that they are connected. And if one becomes empty, it drags down the rest. So if you are giving too much or you're over contributing and that bucket becomes low, your vitality is low. Your ability to connect is low. And I say this because we're talking about balance, and it's important to keep these things in balance. So, for example, earlier in the month, I spent a lot of time doing some great networking events, going out and seeing some friends, visited family. So in 2 weeks, I did a lot. And I'm an introvert, which means I can be social, but I also need time to recharge. So I'm out in the world running around for 2 weeks straight. And my connection bucket definitely filled up, but my vitality bucket was like down to nothing. And so the week after, I was just like, I can't see anyone. I can't do anything to kind of even these things out. And we need to pay attention to how these three are working within our lives. We need connection, we need community, and we need to feel useful in this world, but we also need to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves and our vitality and our body and our brain. When these buckets are full, then we have more to give of ourselves to our job, to our community, to our family, our friends. So in order to have any balance, you need to get clear on what you want. And this could be a whole series of workshops on their own. But I want to give the example of, I'll give an example, my own example. So for example, I took a huge step back from my career. I was a finance and operations director. I had a pretty high job, but I wasn't feeling that collaboration and that contribution part. And so I stepped back from my career and I became a life coach. That was me. That was a big shift, but it can be small things too. Like even just the last couple of weeks, me realizing I've been out too much. I need to actually spend some time at home doing things that fill up and fuel my vitality. It could be that there's something you've set aside because work's taking up too much time. And you're like, wait a minute, this is encroached too much on my family life, my creative life, my ability to do the things I want to do. And so we need to right side this. So for today, it's getting clear on what you want and also what you might need in your life in order to start implementing balance. We've been told a lot of things, and not all of them are true. I mean, shocking. And the reality is that we live in a world that has been structured on certain things that support certain types of people. Racism, sexism, ableism. I could go on. One of the things that I think has been an interesting shift, especially as the world shut down and tried to live through a pandemic, and we're still living through a pandemic, is the impact that capitalism and our jobs have on our lives. And there's been a bit more pushback to say, wait a minute, you don't own me. I do a job, I get money. There's a value exchange here, but I also have the right to have a life. And I think one of the biggest myths we've been told is that we should be able to have work-life balance. And even now we've got, employees talking about work-life balance, and nobody really knows what that actually means or is doing the right things to make it happen. There is no such thing as balance in life. We are always going to be a little out of alignment in some area of our life. Sometimes it's because of lack of sleep, because we're caring for a sick child. Sometimes it might mean missing a family event because of a big project due at work, or vice versa. So if we examine our belief in balance and we realize that it is false and it's not possible, then when we fail at this balance that we've been sold, we don't hold ourselves accountable. It's the system that should be held accountable, not myself. So if I end up missing, for example, a child's soccer game because work came up, and I'm beating myself up because I should be able to do it all and that I should be able to balance these things. The reality is that there is no such thing as balance, and that something is always going to have to give. But we don't have to beat ourselves up. We don't have to hold ourselves accountable. We just have to figure out a way to make those choices, make the things work as best as we can. And that's why I'm talking about imperfect balance, because something is always going to be a little out of whack. And typically I'm saying when we talk about balance, it's typically work-life balance. But, for some people, it may be life balance. It may be trying to manage caretaking somebody who's sick. It can be trying to manage a household. There's so many areas that we look at these things. So I don't want to exclude anyone just because I'm talking about work-life balance. That's kind of primarily what we tend to refer to. So what if we didn't buy what they were selling? What if we didn't have to have it all? What if we actually had a choice? And this is a mindset shift. And something that I think when we talk about, or when you Google like how to have balance, we don't talk about the internal shifts that need to happen in order to have some form of balance or imperfect balance in our lives. We are all juggling a lot, especially women who are caretakers. What if we decided we didn't have to have it all? So, for example, I have a coaching client who woke up one day in her mid-30s, primarily why she came to me for life coaching, and realized she'd been climbing the corporate ladder at work for all the wrong reasons. And part of it was parental pressure to be perfect, to be successful. And part of it was peer group, women her age, that's what they were doing. And she realized she wanted more in life. And so we've been really working together to first get clear on what it is she wanted, what she wanted from work, what she wanted from her life. And really for her, she was at heart an artist, and to make time to carve out for her art. And so setting boundaries at work, trying to kind of push back a bit at the workload she's been given, has been giving her time to explore what she loves to do, which is making art. And so, again, it was just this idea of that's what you do in life. You graduate from college, you get married, you have kids, you work up the corporate ladder, pick whichever your poison is. But we have choices. We don't have to do it all. Like me, I took a huge step backwards from a career because I wanted something different in my life. The next thing, balls are going to drop. The reality is we're all juggling so many different things. We're already dropping balls. Hey, Colleen. So we're going to continue dropping balls. Like, this is just life. We're always going to have a little bit too much on our plate. But what if we could choose which ones to put down temporarily? And this goes back to what I was saying earlier about having a mind shift. Right now, we feel put upon and overwhelmed and stressed because we're dropping balls. But what if you could just kind of say, okay, I'm going to pause on this one. I'm going to choose to set this one on the back burner. And then you're gaining control of what it is you want in your life. And I'm going to acknowledge sometimes life will throw you a curveball, or there'll be an emergency, and you may not have the ability to choose. But oftentimes we can choose which things to focus on and which can be set on the back burner. So I used to do finance, which is kind of amazing because I had an English degree, but that's a whole nother story. So I was in charge of an annual budget of $25 million. And I was the one responsible for submitting that budget up to, the higher powers that be. Every year before the budget was due, thanks to the fact that my coworkers didn't understand how much time it took to put this thing together, I was having to work late every night, sometimes till 10, 11 o'clock at night with an Excel spreadsheet trying to put this thing together. My friends and family knew, oh, it's budget time. We're just not going to see candy. Yet when it was over, when the budget was done, because this is a discrete project, in the meantime, I put friends, family, creative outlets, all the things on the back burner. But when the budget was done, I made the conscious choice to pick those things back up and put work back in its proper box, which meant not working until 10, 11 o'clock every night. Again, emergencies are going to happen. Things are going to come up. And sometimes like me, when I was going out doing too much things, extroverting hard in a way that was challenging for me, I put things that make me happy on the back burner, like reading, staying home watching TV, things like that. So you can choose where to put your focus. Like my client who's realizing, I want to do less extra projects at work, which means maybe she's not going to get a promotion in the next year, but she doesn't want that promotion. She actually doesn't want more responsibility. And so she's saying, I'm choosing to push this aside right now today, and I'm going to focus on other things in my life. The other part, though, is that you can choose to change it. She may next year be like, wait a minute, I'm actually interested in this idea of a promotion or doing something different, doing something new. I'm going to put more effort into work, and I'm put these things on the back burner. But you get to choose, at least when it's not an emergency situation. So what if we gave more to ourselves or sometimes to our job or family? So again, it's not going to happen overnight, but you get to figure out if you're overwhelmed, you're stressed, which of the things right now that are pulling at your time and attention can you consciously set aside? And what's one thing that you're doing today that you could give a little less time and attention to in order to give yourself some space? Because sometimes we take things on out of obligation or out of a feeling of, I should be doing this. Think of that thing that you're doing. Sometimes I know for mothers, it's like going to PTA meetings or feeling the pressure to be at the soccer club league mom or whatever it is. What's the thing that you can set aside that you don't have to focus on today? Okay. Now that I've talked about some of the mind shifts that we need to think about, like not buying into the myth that there is work-life balance, because there isn't. Not believing that we can have it all. You get to define what having it all means to you. For some of us, like me, it meant not having a husband and children so I can do these other things in my life that I want to do. And I've had some amazing life experiences. That was my choice. For some, it might mean having a family and setting career on the side for a little while. I have a friend I was friends with in high school through college who did the get married, have kids, family route, set her high-powered career as a consultant for some accounting firm on pause while her kids were young. She was like a substitute teacher for a while. And now that her kids are grown, she's picking that back up again. It's challenging, but she's doing it because that was her choice. She wanted to be there for her kids in the way her mom had been for her. So let's talk about a couple of things that we can do. First, this is my favorite, the stop doing list. It's kind of self-explanatory, but let's work through it together. What one thing can you stop doing or hit pause on? And it's really funny because a month or so ago, I was going through some old papers and I pulled out an old journal and I found my stop doing list. And a lot of it was about setting boundaries around my time, even if it was for things that I may want to do, because I was being pulled into too many different directions. And I needed to create time and space for myself to do what fuels me up. So think of something either at work or in your family or even in your friends that you've taken on out of a sense of I should or obligation. If you feel like you resent it or that person, that is a key clue there that it's something you probably should take off your plate. The other thing I was add, because I know we have some entrepreneurs and business owners in this call, is that we are able to build our lives in a very different way. But some owners actually find that they've built themselves into a day job feeling. So if there's something you're doing or a client or something that is causing you to feel that way and not that you have the freedom to run your business, that's another indicator that it's something you should be pushing aside, delegating, taking off your plate. The other thing I'd add is for me at work, and women tend to do this, we prove ourselves competent in our job. We're really good at getting the work done. But what happens is because we're competent, other people bring things that aren't getting done to us because people around us are incompetent or not doing their jobs. So that's another good place to look at where all of a sudden your job description has broadened because people are trying to go around the one person in the office who doesn't do their job. This was something I was working on with the client I mentioned, and it drastically decreased her workload, but not her performance. In fact, her performance level went up because she wasn't doing all the stuff outside her job. Again, if work isn't your main pain point, think of family, friends. And sometimes, I've had to say no to family or friends because I just didn't have the time or the capacity, and that's okay. It's my stop doing list. Okay, next up, boundaries. A boundary is kind of at its heart a request you make to protect yourself, your time, and your energy. And this sometimes can expand. You set a boundary to protect your family as well. So at work, this may look like a boss who drops something in a project in your lap at the last minute. And you have the right to say, hey, boss, I can do this project, but I'm currently working on X, Y, and Z. Which one's going to not get done in time? You get to choose because I'm not doing them all. You say it nicely and politely, but the reality is you can't do it all. And you have the right to push back on those things. I had friends who had a baby. I love this child. I am an aunt to this child, but they would often ask me to babysit when he was younger. And I did it a few times. And then I realized that I am a woman who is child-free. So the assumption is I have all this extra free time. And you'll run into this too often at work where it's like, oh, so-and-so has to go pick up their kids. You need to do this. Well, sorry, no. I started saying, no, I can't. But one time there was an emergency, like someone was sick, had to take the husband to the hospital. Like, okay, I picked up the kid. Of course I'm going to be there for them. But I'm not the on-call, I'm not the on-call babysitter. I'm the, oh crap, emergency babysitter. And that child pretty much had to teach me how to babysit him. So, so think of boundaries that you may need to set where people are kind of encroaching in on your time and energy. The best thing to do with a boundary is to be clear and direct. And mine was, I'm sorry, I can't babysit. If you waffle or if you're unclear and you open up things to miscommunication, it gets difficult. The thing that I've loved, and when I work with clients, helping them set boundaries, because a boundary, even the stop doing list and the setting a boundary, it feels so like just a bad thing. You know, it's like I'm saying no to things, and that's a bad thing. We've been taught to always kind of like take on, and say yes. But when you set boundaries, you open things up for other possibilities. Like my client who started setting boundaries at work, she returned to an art practice and has started creating this amazing series of art that she didn't even know she had in her, but she needed the time and space to do. Boundaries change over time. What you say no today might actually change tomorrow. So you can always feel free to change your mind because you're a human being and set different boundaries or revisit them at a later point. The last thing I'm going to say is you are allowed to say no. Especially since most of the people on this workshop are women. We have been socialized to be nice to people. I one time, this was after I was in a car accident. I was on crutches at a bookstore, and a gentleman came up to me, and I couldn't really understand him. And so I kept being nice, and I kept trying to help the stranger in a bookshop until I realized he was saying very sexually explicit things to me. And I still stood there for a good 2 minutes, thinking I had to help him. And this man was being horrific to me. But I've been socialized to be like, this is my responsibility to take care of the world. You're allowed to say no. You're allowed to walk away. You're allowed to make choices that suit you and your needs. So, what does perfect imbalance look and feel like for you? It's going to be different for all of us depending on what the needs are for you, your family, your friends, whoever is in your orbit that you might need to take care of at some point in time. So I want you to walk out of here with some actionable steps. The first is to make sure you're filling your buckets, which means you're taking care of yourself. The one bucket's vitality, which is your mind, your body. Next bucket's connection, which is your connection to people. And then the other is your contribution, which is how you give back to the world in order to feel good. You get to choose which balls to drop. And we just need to accept that we're going to miss things sometimes, or we're going to need to put something aside so we can work on the other stuff. Think about that stop doing list. What's one thing today that you can stop doing because it's not serving you? It might be making someone else feel good, but it's not making you feel good. And then what's a boundary you need to set? So I like to give people a chance to, hang on 1 second. I like to give people a chance to have a conversation, and I'm going to stop the recording here.